Mhm.
Morning,
I
everybody.
I think you might be live, might not be. We'll have to see if we get the response in the chat. But it looks like from our end that we are. So I think once we get maybe a response in chat to confirm, then we should be good to go. Um, Netflix TV says sup. Yes, thank you for spamming all the numbers um in the chat. So welcome. Um, you're not at all late again, nor are you early. Fair enough.
It
Fair,
does
fair.
seem as though we are live. Yeah,
Yes,
that
I
seems
think.
like a logical conclusion. I
Yes.
think.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Awesome.
All. So,
Hi.
first of all, let me welcome Hen. Welcome, my friend.
Hi, Harry. Morning.
Hi. Morning,
The
morning, even
joke
though
is
it.
that I'm lazy, so it's always morning because I just woke up, which is not the case, but you know.
And it's also 9 p.m.
Uh,
right there, right now. So, we've got quite a lot to get through today. And it's also going to be kind of like a. I'm not sure how many of you went to university, but it's kind of, we'll try and be like me and Hen are going to be like your lecturers today. We're going to take you through the rights situation from the start. Then we are going to go through where the current situation is, then where what we've heard rumors wise, then where what the future might hold. So that is something that will come up. But also one thing like to quickly share at the start is of course this happened a few days ago. So yay, well done, Hen. We did it. Kinda.
Yippee!
Hopefully. Posted this nice picture. Very nice picture. Um and I
Ah,
think
Morfid's famed squint laugh.
squint
Very
lovely.
cute.
Glad you can smile. I think that confirms it. Glad you
Yeah, but I
can.
was saying that's the way her smile always looked. I've seen her smile or
Mm-hmm.
laugh or chuckle a
Yep.
lot, and she always does that squint thing. Very cute.
Mm-hmm. Netro, I'm not going to. We're not going to go into that Netro TV. So we've done the introduction now. Let's get into it. So the first part, Hen, is going to talk you through it, and then I'm going to go through the current situation, and then we'll go on from there. So I
Yeah.
think, Hen, do you want to start from 1969?
Well, yeah, I think as a background we should like even before that, just The Hobbit was published 1938, Lord of the Rings what is it? Um 1954, and
Yep.
then and The Hobbit was very popular immediately. The Lord of the Rings became popular as it crossed over to the US, originally in bootlegs and in copies that there was a mishap with the copyright, and as a result it generated interest in film adaptations pretty quickly, and Tolkien was open to the idea of it, to exploring it. The first few attempts at an adaptation kind of wore him out, and in 1967 he entered negotiations with United Artists, which was a very big studio at the time. Today it's been subsumed into MGM and now Amazon. But he entered negotiation for the production of a film, which entailed him selling the film and the miniseries, so a series of 8 episodes or less, rights, and he sold them in perpetuity. Normally, and we will get to this with Amazon as well, these things would be leased, and Tolkien had experimented with leasing the rights before, had a bad experience with it, decided to just sell it. You can psychoanalyze his motivations for doing
Yep.
that in all sorts of ways, but that's kind of beyond the scope of our conversation here. So
Yep.
in 1969, the deal went through, got through, and the rights had been sold. The rights to The Hobbit and to The Lord of the Rings to United Artists,
Yep.
and they kind of languished there. They tried to get it off the ground in several ways,
The Beatles
but they
stuff.
the Beatles stuff was concurrent to the negotiations. The Beatles
Mm.
wanted to make a film. They had a free deal right with United Artists. They made two films, and they made a TV film, Yellow Submarine. And then United Artists was like, well, no, that doesn't really count as a third film in the deal. You still need to make a third film to
Yeah.
be done with your obligations to us. And
So
then their agent was like, oh, let's do Lord of the Rings. And then they were like, oh, we're actually in negotiations for the Lord of the Rings right now. But then it kind of
mhm.
fizzled.
I think to summarize this point, I think as sure you can read, United Artists are now the owners of the film slash miniseries rights. That's just the main thing to
Yeah, for
take
the
from
Lord
here.
of the Rings and the Hobbit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those two books only. Then we
Yeah,
move
and
to
only
19.
for again cinema and miniseries. They talked about the TV rights. They had technically, I think, first bidding for them, but they
Yeah,
never got them. At the time, the idea of doing the Lord of the Rings on TV, it had been discussed, but it was highly impractical. It would have been basically sock puppets and stop
yeah.
motion kind of Thunderbirds type thing.
hmm
Very
So
impractical.
now we move on to 1976. So do you want to quickly
Yes.
talk us through this?
So basically, the rights, having languished at United Artists, several stalled attempts, really just laid there until Ralph Bakshi wanted to make an animated film of it. He basically heard that the earlier attempt by Sir John Berman, with the Beatles as well, by the way, fell through completely. He read it in Variety or something and then was like, aha, this is my chance. And he went to United Artists and, in cooperation with MGM, got the rights. At some point, independent producer Saul Zaentz, who's a very important figure and a very important independent producer, made Amadeus, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, English Patient, lots of really great movies actually. He got involved as the producer, and he established a new company which he called Middle Earth Enterprises. A lot of
Yeah,
people, you hear Middle Earth and you're like, aha, that's the Tolkien estate. No, that's not the Tolkien estate. Middle Earth Enterprises is a company that belongs to Saul Zaentz. And in the course of the deal to make the Bakshi film, he basically, United Artists sold him the rights to The Lord of the Rings. And because they had option doing it, they sold him part of the rights to The Hobbit. Basically, Middle Earth, Saul died in 2017, I think 2015. But his Middle Earth Enterprises, the organization he established, holds the rights to make an adaptation, a film adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, and holds the right to make a film adaptation of The Hobbit, but not to distribute it. The distribution rights for The Hobbit belong to MGM.
yeah.
Um,
So I think just to summarize here then from the start. So in 1969, for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits only, United Artists have the rights here.
yeah.
Then we move um, a couple years later, and now United Artists sell them to Solzance. And
Yeah,
he
with the
sells them,
exception
yeah,
of part of the rights to The
yeah,
Hobbit, which
part,
is not
yeah.
very significant here, yeah.
hmm Then
Well, not
under
very significant
Solzance,
anymore.
and who is still, which is still around today, we have the beginning of Middle Earth Enterprises. So
Yes.
Solzance and Middle Earth Enterprises hold these rights, but now this is where we're going to see the beginning of Warner Brothers. So we move to 1997, Hen.
Yes. Actually, Peter Jackson pitched doing The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit actually in October 1995. And they started doing it with Miramax, which is a Disney company. And Saul Zaentz was friends with the executives at Miramax, and he extends. The idea is he leases the rights to a film company to make movies of. So first it was to Miramax and Disney, then the project fell through, went to New Line, which is a Warner Brothers subsidiary, in 1997, and Saul
hmm
Zaentz leased the rights to New Line and Warner Brothers, and they basically been on lease with Warner Brothers ever since.
hmm
So The Lord of the Rings was made based on that lease, and then many years, not many, like what, 8 years later, with cooperation with MGM at this point, who were going through a lot of financial difficulties in the intervening years, made The Hobbit, and now they're making the War of the Rohirrim, all based on these completely on this list. Warner
Yep.
Brothers do not own the rights; they only lease them from Middle Earth Enterprises. They do own
And
something else, which will they do own. Yeah, they
well,
own the assets of the films themselves, and they also happen to own uh, all of Zan's pre-1990 movies. They bought them at some point, and that includes the Bakshi Lord of the Rings, and also by happenstance, the Ranking Bass library, so also the Ranking Bass TV special, which were
yeah.
not made based on any rights. They were made exploiting a loophole in the publication of the Lord of the Rings that made it actually until 1996. The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit were public domain in the US.
So, and also one thing Tim Bolton mentions in chat, Middle Earth Enterprise is actually called Tolkien Enterprises first, so that is
Yes, they changed the
that's
name. That's correct. It
yeah,
was called Tolkien Enterprises. Soul's own company is called Fantasy Films. Funnily enough, it was
yeah.
Fantasy Records, then Fantasy Film, and finally Tolkien Enterprises, and now Middle Earth
So,
Enterprises.
and I think this is the interesting thing where sometimes people do get a bit confused. So, Warner Brothers don't have the master rights to the
No, they
Lord.
lease
They
them.
don't. It is leased
That's very normal.
by
That's
media.
very
Yeah,
normal.
yeah. It just sometimes people get confused there. So they are leased. Say in the same way we'll get into how Amazon has it basically leased
Yes,
as well from
yes.
the Tolkien Sea. So how it works is Middle Earth Enterprises. This we'll still call them that. This at this stage we won't mention Embrace yet to make
Yeah, they
confusing.
are. It's
Yeah,
still Middle Earth
it's still yeah. No, I
Enterprises.
know it's
It's
still Middle
just
Earth,
that
but like
Embracer owns Middle Earth
yeah.
Enterprises now, but it's the same company and even the same people in the
But for
company.
the sake of simplicity, right now, we'll just state it as do Middle Earth Enterprises they lease movie rights to Warner Brothers, and um, then I think the Tolkien estate they lease the television because remember back in I believe it is this deal here, TV rights were never sold, so the
Yeah,
Tolkien
they were never.
estate still have that. And then now let's move to as people are starting to talk in chat
Yes.
already.
I
Things of power,
it says procures, but as Harry mentioned very correctly, the TV rights are also leased to
at
Amazon,
least,
which
yeah.
is the normal, by the way. Usually, people don't sell IPs to studios if they can help it. The fact that Tolkien did sell the rights outright is an anomaly. Usually, you
Mhm.
just lease them, and so Amazon is technically leasing the TV rights from the
Yeah.
Tolkien estate. And also in
It's
2022, they bought MGM, which has that residual bit of rights to distribute a film adaptation of The Hobbit, which is completely insignificant because such a film adaptation has already been made with MGM.
I think the best way to do it is I'm not sure if people follow soccer, football. If you loan a player out to like get a loan for a season, that means that player is what's it called? Is not the full property of that club. So he doesn't play for that club, and he actually plays for
Yeah,
the form where he's a member
yeah.
of the former club, but he also plays here.
The really important thing about it being leased is the fact that they have to keep paying for it every once in a while. They have to forward a payment to Talk Middle Earth
Yeah.
Enterprises,
And that's also actually Tim Bolton's
and they
mentioned,
have
and
to
we'll
do
get to
something with it.
yeah
So
later on around the matching rights.
yeah,
This
matching
is true.
rights. That's
There
what
is
they have.
matching rights, and
Yes,
but now let's talk about MGM here. MGM in 2010, Amazon by MGM basically
yes.
outright. Was it like 8 billion? Landing with the rights to distribute a film or miniseries based on The Hobbit. So because of this, say for example, okay, the rights, actual movie and film rights, maybe were sold to I don't know Paramount. Actually, so okay, let's say they were sold to Apple, for example. Apple has them. Even though Apple has those rights leased, unless they buy it outright, it still has to be distributed by MGM. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. Like, you look at The Hobbit that was actually produced. It was produced with MGM. They had to,
Yes, I'm saying
but
here.
but in terms of who actually distributed it, they had a deal with MG. Like MGM owns the distribution rights, so they have to be involved. But in terms of who actually distributed it, they had it worked out so that actually Warner's did most of the distributing. MGM distributed it on a few foreign territories and I think on TV.
Mhm.
And other
Yeah,
than that, it was totally Warner Brothers. So
and then
MGM is just their involvement in anything Hobbit related is or was completely just legal obligation. It had very little to do with actually making or even the distribution of the film.
Mm-hmm. And then now we go to the final part. This frame is bloody annoying. Let's get rid of this. Sorry, bear with us a moment. So, Sol's Aunt's estate is the puts Middle Earth Enterprises on sale, and they are picked up by Embrace, who were the unlikely, I think.
Yeah, nobody expected they were like a dark horse that came out of
And
nowhere. Yeah,
people are saying,
and they didn't
from
buy
what
them for
we,
a lot of money.
yeah,
It
yeah,
didn't cost a lot of money.
and this is the reason why people asking why didn't Amazon just go out and buy Middle Earth Enterprises? Why didn't Warner Brothers just go and do it? Um, and that's because when looking at how it was the situation during that period, and technically still is, there was a lot of technicalities, still some, who has this, who has that around the rights as a problem.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is
I, I,
quite,
I, al- I also personally think, and this is also why ultimately Embracer bought it fairly cheap.
yeah,
Uh, these rights are not super useful at the moment
yes,
because
no,
nobody is
Warner,
interested in actually redoing the Lord of the Rings,
yeah,
especially not again as movies. Like if Amazon did this as a
except.
series, okay, maybe. And even Amazon aren't willing to tread that ground again yet.
Saying that, we did know that HBO did have the picture. We didn't know it came
Yeah,
through.
they pitched it, but I'm not sure. It seems to me that it was Amazon telling Variety about other pitches of
But
other
the
people, so they have special pleading. But also, it's just a pitch, like
yeah,
there
the
are
main
hundreds.
thing though
The
here,
fact
the
of the
main
matter is,
reason
it didn't
behind
go through.
it was because the fact that these rights are really entangled at the minute, and that is why no company is going out took out by it right now. But who knows? In a year's time, once this does get sorted potentially out, then who knows what could happen. But so first of all, thank you, Hen, for going through this history. So it would it starts off with it actually talking about pictures. When we spoke to that failed showrunner, it was quite funny. We heard we heard one pitch that
Yes.
um that was it Numenor was going to fall by season 2, and then season 5 was going to be young Aragon was
Yeah,
going to be
they
season 5.
no. Oh
I think
no,
that that was
yeah,
one of them. One of the like the crap. I don't want to be rude, but it was not the best because it got turned down straight away. Then what was the other? There was another one where they were going to start Lord of the Rings like midway through the show, and it was like time jump after time jump, and that was another thing.
yes, yeah. The Amazon held they held like
Mm-hmm.
auditions in terms of possible showrunners and tried out different people and different ideas and different frameworks of doing it. The one thing that they didn't want to do, we know this, is that they didn't want to retread ground covered by the films that were already made, which is exactly
Mm-hmm.
why I think these rights were not very valuable to Amazon.
Okay,
Because there's
so
only so much you can do with these rights. They're only for The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And the appendices, both of these sets of rights for TV and for film do include the appendices. And the appendices are what there's a lot of not a ton of stuff, but
and
there is stuff in there. So
indeed, yeah. So now, so what? So Soul of Cinder
yeah,
mentions
we're
what
getting
about?
to this.
We'll get to that. We'll get into all that juicy stuff. Into a second. So now, firstly, thank you, and I'm going to take over now. So, um, current right situation, circa February, and I mentioned February because I'll come back later on why March and the end of March might be quite an interesting thing.
Yes.
So back to it. Middle Earth Enterprises, despite being bought by Embracer are interestingly keeping Middle Earth Enterprises still separate as its own entity within Embracer. And this can be speculation on us. This is like speculation now, but people who are attached with Embracer are saying potentially this is a reason because maybe it makes it easier if they ever want to sell Middle Earth Enterprises, they can sell it as a separate entity, so they're keeping it quite attached. So that's just that's more gossip and stuff. So we're not
I
going
have
to
to
get into
say though,
that.
you will see this is very true also. Movies, games, and merchandise. Embracer is largely a game
Yeah,
corporate, does a lot of games. So I
and
think these rights were mostly lucrative for them in terms of games.
mhm,
And the only announcement we got actually just recently was about games. They say they have 5 lined
yeah,
up, I think. Yeah.
yeah. So um, now where we go to this is the big story that we broke a few weeks ago, I think it's a month ago. So as of right now, Warner Brothers has a sublease of the rights to adapt the books into it. Is this the right one? Yeah, the
Yeah, I
books
think
into
so.
movies, but it is expiring, and Middle Earth Enterprise does not want to renew it. So this is talking about the one right here. So whatever happened here is not getting. They don't want to renew this anymore, and so
I think
and
I think we yeah.
interesting stuff we have heard. So from what I've understand from people close to Embrace, there has still been no discussion really between Embracer and Warner Brothers as of yet. So they have
Mm.
put the reach saying we want them to leave. Oh, is this wrong one? Um, there has been no reach out from from Warner Brothers, and the feelings is Warner Brothers is not in the best state right now, and it is
A lot of
interesting,
movie
of course,
studios are, yeah.
yeah, and the
Disney
relationship
too.
between that is going to be why, as of right now, they do not want to renew it. What I do know from finance firms involved with this actual deal, the first deadline they are setting themselves is the end of April, but that does not mean that will happen by then. But the contractors working on this are working until the end of April to try and get Warner Brothers um, to 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 do
Y-
this.
I
And
do think a lot of this could be read as a kind of bargaining tactic because you can, if you wrestle it out of Warner
uh,
Brothers, you can then list it back to them in a higher price,
you
and
can, but then it brings in that could be, of course, possibility. But
I think it's very
whether
possible. We'll get
no,
to it.
we'll get this at the end. But then whether it's a priority for Warner Brothers and whether or not they have the money to do that is the discussion here. But and also another thing around like for War of the Rohirrim, I think everybody knows pretty clearly they did to keep the rights for a bit longer. And I'm not sure technically what a rounding error budget is, but I know there is a rounding error budget associated with War of the Rohirrim. So whether someone in chat wants to explain what that means, that's all I know really about that movie at the
Yeah,
minute. But
the fact that there is a movie in production allows them to
yeah.
retain the lease. Yeah,
For this, but then after end
which,
of
yeah,
2023, they do
yeah.
not want Warner Brothers to have it anymore.
Yeah,
But then,
which we should say, just because War of the Rohirrim was at least partially conceived of to sort of extend the lease, does not mean that the production itself is like we'll have to see the movie itself and see
we'll
what it's
see.
like.
Yeah, but all we know is, as of right now, War of the Rohirrim is still coming out.
Yeah,
Um,
well, we know this too
I
from
think
the Embracer release.
you can answer this question. I know. Is there a chance of Amazon purchasing the assets rights from the movies? I don't.
Yeah, that's one of our big points, I guess, which
Yeah,
is that technically speaking, as far as I know, we have some conflicting information on this, but the rights to the assets of the films themselves and the assets of those films belongs to Warner Brothers. They
yeah,
made the films on rights that are from Middle Earth Enterprises, but the films themselves, the productions themselves, belong to Warner Brothers. The negatives are in Warner Brothers. All the dailies from all the movies, if you look at the making ofs, they're all watermarked property of New Line Cinema. Um, so
yeah.
technically, and this is why like Amazon, strictly speaking, has a New Line logo at the end of the episode, so they have something going on with New Line. But as of yet, they haven't used anything that looks. There's not been a single thing in the Amazon show that is exactly the same as it was in the New Line period. Even the Anduril that's in the back of one of the shots is not the same blade.
Um,
Everything is a
yeah,
little bit tweaked.
and
Everything is just vaguely similar because
a
they can't.
funny.
The designs belong to Warner's, and this would be something very important to Embracer because you see, the only other we have a very prominent six-film production now coming on its seventh, and we have a completely separate production by Amazon, which is trying to evoke the same production design. So clearly, this production design has currency in Hollywood, and so you
Yeah,
would assume that Embracer would want to work with someone that has the rights to that production design,
But
i.e.,
interestingly, what we
Warner
found
Brothers.
out, we'll get to later on around merchandise, they might not even need Warner Brothers in that regard. So we'll get
I,
to in a
th-
bit, but we'll
I
get to
think
that.
that we'll get to that. Yeah.
And okay, get forward. Okay, so now this is an interesting one that we learnt of. Middle Earth Enterprise has already regained the rights to make movies based on characters from the above books, Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits, that aren't adaptations of the books. So if Middle Earth
Yeah, you
Enterprises
can.
wanted to make an original Aragorn movie about his life before or after Lord of the Rings, and it wasn't using anything directly from the books, Middle Earth Enterprises can do this. Like
Yes,
for
that's
example,
correct.
people debate whether or not this would literally be people would discuss. Oh yeah, Amazon's Rings of Power. Really is the original story. This and that. Well, Middle Earth Enterprise can literally make a brand new story in Aragon like that tomorrow. But of course, due to
If they,
demand and
yes,
stuff, they
yes,
they they
that's
they will
perfectly
not.
permissible
Um,
given the contract. They can extrapolate very wildly from the material, especially from the appendices. Yes.
and But then, oh, sorry, this was meant to be one that came earlier. Middle Earth Enterprises one of us to amicably let go of their rights to adapt the books by end of this year, so they could find a new partner for the franchise's movie future. They need to first get the movie rights back without major legal issues before they look for new owners. So this is an interesting thing I heard. No one at Embracer wants to go down the story of going through a lawsuit, having to go through courts, but if it will have, unless a settlement can be reached, it looks like Embracer do want these rights back. And I know from investors in Embracer who want to invest, because Embracer have made quite a lot of losses recently. These investors who are putting it into the company, they want it back. They want this stuff back so it can be sold again. So it raise the stock price. This is where it gets technical away from Lord of the Rings and being a Tolkien fan. This is what these investors want. And so yeah, that's just an interesting thing there. Now, Middle-earth Enterprises has full master rights to Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits for games and merchandise. This is something we've heard. Of course, we cannot.
Yeah.
This is out of everything. We'll keep this as asterisk. But I personally believe that I put faith in this head. Well, of course, we don't know, but it's part of their deal with Warner Brothers. They can also adapt their movies into any games or merchandise they want. So
Yes, they
that,
can.
yeah,
They
and then
can.
so this is also rings true for Rings of Power. Amazon is a funny thing. Amazon don't even own the rights to the Rings of Power to the
To the
title, the
name,
Rings of Power. Yeah, they don't own the
Middle
rights
Earth
to the name.
Enterprises. Yeah.
But there was a meeting back in August or earlier last year where Middle-earth Enterprises and Amazon had a meeting, well, Embracer, and they said, okay, even though this is technically illegal, we will let you guys use the name The Rings of Power, even though you guys do not own it. So that is a favor that Rings
For money,
have done, and in response. So games, and now this works in so Embracer can make Rings
they
of
can.
Power
Yes.
merge, but they cannot use the the stuff from the Rings of Power, like the designs and stuff, unless they find this has to be in coalition and agreement with Amazon.
Yeah,
So
but
this is
the
why.
same is true of
So
Warner's.
yeah,
Like they do
yeah,
need
Warner's unless that deal has
they
been
do
made.
as approval because look,
Yeah.
a great example is the recent even the Lego set. It's
Yeah.
done with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers are
What
credited.
we did hear
So
that
because it looks like they're Riven.
what I did hear that is Warner Brothers did not know about the release of that coming at that specific point. So it's interesting
Well,
the
that's yeah, but they
dialogue.
are credited on the Lego site
But that's probably from stuff
in
about
the
from like 2 years or earlier before.
yeah, but
But
still, it's just it's I think it's because it's that it's just that it's their Rivendell.
yeah. But theoretically, if they wanted to, they could literally, of course, it's good businessmanship to do that. But if they wanted to like make a new thing without Amazon, without Warner Brothers, I guess you technically could. But
Yes. In
we'll differ on
merchandise
that.
and games, I believe they can. In terms of more film productions, which we
Yeah,
know
we're
they
not
want to
talking
do,
about the
not so
here.
much.
We'll
Yes.
we'll move on to the next one. Middle-earth Enterprises co-shares the rights with the Tolkien estate to adapt Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit into a television miniseries less than 8 episodes. They would need to collaborate with the Tolkien estate on this, so nothing has ever happened to date. So because of that, so then what happens here is effectively this is the Tolkien state both own these rights, and it can be made, but the fact that no one hasn't gone down this
Yeah.
route as of
Yeah.
yet. So that is an interesting thing that we could, like, anyone, Paramount, Apple, even Warner Brothers can come and buy these. These rights are open right now. Nobody has gone near them. And again, that might be due to the fact, as Hen mentioned earlier, is there really an appetite to have these into television series right now, which could be a possible thing. But maybe in 10 years' time, when the
Yeah.
saturation maybe just start coming in, these could easily be up.
You
Someone can
also,
buy.
but you do think like I think the attractiveness of something like Lord of the Rings is either as a movie series or as a long form streaming series. So an 8 episode miniseries,
Yeah,
yeah, I think
it's
people would
not the
choose
best.
like it's neither fish
I
nor
guess
fowl.
I guess The Hobbit you could potentially,
Yeah,
put a pitch that could be. I agree that is not the form or ideal thing there. But now
yeah,
moving on to the
commercially as
next.
well.
Yeah. The Tolkien estate owned the master rights to adapt Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit on television for any show over 8 episodes long. And this is the thing subleased to Amazon. So that is what we have around Amazon. And the next part is quite
Yes.
interesting. I can actually try and pull up some not evidence, but letters as well. But once we move on to the next one, Amazon has bought and has bought the sublease rights from the Tolkien estate to freely adapt anything they want from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit into 2 television series, one of which will be 50 episodes long, Rings of Power, and the other yet to be decided. So people are
Yeah, the
thinking
spin-off they used to
Amazon,
talk
yeah,
about.
Amazon have, like, there can be multiple spin-offs. As of right now, they only have one spin-off that they can do after the Lord, after the Rings of Power. So that is where that one is. And then I think this is nearly second to last one. So people have been speculating about this as well. This is coming from people who, so where this information from is on the screen. Of course, we're not going to publicly 100% give all the sources away, but this is from people who manage the rights legally. That's all I would say. And they're saying Amazon also buys slash gets special permission from both the Tolkien estate and Middle Earth Enterprise to use things from the books published after Lord of the Rings. Unlike Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, they do not get to freely use whatever they want, but they've also not really been denied anything. So this means things from the Silmarillion Unfinished Tales can and will appear in Amazon adaptations, but officially it won't be
Yeah.
adapted from
You
them.
know, because the rights in this case are leased directly from the Tolkien estate, they can, strictly speaking, go to them and ask, can we use this item or this thing? It's like, the 1981 BBC radio adaptation of The Lord of the Rings was done also directly with the Tolkien estate. So Brian Sibley,
Hmm.
like wanted something from Unfinished Tales, so he basically asked Christopher. And Christopher was like, okay, fine, go ahead, use it. It's that sort of thing, obviously with a lot more money involved, but still. As of yet, I think the only thing we've seen in the season that they have used, I think they took the approach of like, let's write it based just on the rights that we know we have, and then like make little like, nudges. Because the only thing I think they name drop one or two names that they wouldn't, have the rights to without
Yeah.
asking the Tolkien estate. But
And
otherwise, the scenario was all done completely based just on the appendices.
um, yep. And
But this is
interestingly,
still very true. Yes.
one thing that I can try and find, if I can find it here, the special request Amazon gave to embrace a Middle Earth Enterprise, etc., and which is in cohesion with the Tolkien estate. It was something on Morgoth and
Yeah.
something, yeah,
All sorts
something
of stuff.
there. Interestingly, it was a letter, and of course the sources some don't have the best knowledge of Tolkien. They don't know which letter, etc. But there was a letter on the blue wizards. I think all the bluest wizards, I think, that Amazon requested to have access to. So if anybody knows what letter that could be,
About the Blue
then
Wizards.
yeah, then let us. Or it was a detachment from I think is it Peoples of Middle Earth? I'm not too sure,
You know, I
but
know. I think what could be here is a little. You know, in an unexpected journey, Gandalf mentions the two blue wizards, but
yeah,
they're never called blue in the Lord
yeah,
of the Rings, the appendices, or anywhere else other than Unfinished Tales.
yeah,
But the Tolkien estate just let it slide because you're really gonna sue about one word.
yeah,
So it's just examples of how these things can be a little bit cajoled because, like, a lot of the White Council stuff was very clearly paraphrasing on Unfinished
yeah,
Tales on the Quest of Erebor. But if you do it, there are ways to sort of nudge these things around a little bit, and
yeah,
Amazon has done the same thing.
yeah.
So,
And um, interestingly, so what I'm trying to read from this Amazon something on Istari on the Istaris, they had special requests to embrace which they accepted. So something there
yeah, I
as well
think our
around that.
Menelaus as well is not mentioned. Like they
No, I'm saying this is for
mentioned it.
season two. This is for season two. They've
Ah, okay.
requested, and this is also so no longer around. This is the new logo that's going to be put on stuff, and that is quite interesting. So now, actually, this is me quite of the interesting part, and I'm not sure how much trouble I will get into, but
Do it.
let's find it. Here we
I'm
go.
I'm 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 the bad the little devil on his shoulder telling him to do
Yes.
it, everybody. That's my
So
role.
the Rings of Power merch update. Why has there been no merch for the show? So while the sale for Embracer was happening, well, for the set Middle Earth Enterprises to Embracer, nothing was really happening, and they couldn't. Amazon couldn't really do anything. And it's interesting to hear this from to see this from Amazon's side. But from what I understand, so if you don't know firstly how the rights work, Amazon cannot produce or make merchandise. They don't have the merchandising right, television merchandising rights. Embracer, well, Middle Earth Enterprises, they do. And interestingly enough,
Yeah.
there were a meeting in December to try and get this, to try and get some, how do you say it, some merch done for the Rings of Power. Um, then I'm going to pull it up, and this is from That's so I'm gonna be saying some stuff from the full list of everything currently being considered for merchandise for the Rings of Power, but Amazon has not approved any of these. So this is things Embracer has wanted to make with Amazon. Amazon have not yet come back to
Do
Embracer.
it.
So these things include figurines of common metal sculptures made of non-precious metal bottle stoppers, axes, swords, fixed blade knives, and sword scabbards, cases for mobile phones, encoded smart cards containing programming used in the field of electronic games,
All the stuff you need to make a
decorative
pizza.
magnets, downloadable electronic games. They move here. Beads for making jewelry keychains of precious metal, watches and clocks, figurines of precious metal, collectible coins, metal keychains, albums, albums for trading cards, albums for stickers, arts and craft clay kits, arts and crafts paint kits, loose leaf binders, bookmarks, printed books, in the field of film, printed calendars, children arts and craft paper kits, printed coffee table books featuring photographic prints, coin albums, printed commemorative, I mean stamp sheets, decals,
Commemorator.
figures made of paper, animation cells, letter openers, lithographic prints, paper cake of decorations, printed postcards, printed posters, printed holograms, printed game book manuals, stamp albums, stick printed collectible trading cards, printed maps, printed songbooks, printed gift books consisting of a book in the field of games, films, and fantasy, printed strategy guides for games. They move on here. Aprons, bathrobes, blouses, costumes for use in role-playing games, dresses,
More
footwear,
pizza stuff.
Halloween headwear, infant wear, clothing, jackets, pajamas, scarves, shirts, wristbands as clothing, vests, hoodies, earmuffs, mittens. Now moving down the contract, action figures, board games, building games, chess sets, dolls, hobby craft kit, compromising primarily components for making toy model figures, an instruction guide for making model figures, jigsaw puzzles, paper dolls, playset buildings, puzzles, snow globes, toy building blocks, toy construction sets, toy model hobbycraft kits for construction, toy made landscapes, scenery, and action figures, and the fishing rods, fishing reels, fishing line, electronic action toys, manipulative games, mechanical toys, music box toys, music toys, plush toys. So that is
All
interest.
the
This is
stuff
an
you need to make
interesting
pizza.
one. Entertainment services, namely entertainment in the nature of live musical performances, which is
Yeah,
quite,
Embracer owns Middle Earth
yeah.
Enterprises own that. They made a lot of Rings
So
musical, like
organizing sporting and
2008 or
cultural
something.
events, activities, feature non-downloadable continuing movies featuring fancy stories and fancy cats delivered by viewing on a big screen. So these, everything I've noted, are stuff that Embracer wants to do merchandise for the Rings of Power Season 2, but they haven't heard back from Amazon as of yet. And someone has mentioned this. Uh, Let me find. So I'm mentioning Lego. I think. What about Legos? From what I understand, Lego is also in board of Embracer, but nothing's approved through Amazon. And trust me, there are so many companies wanting to work with Embracer Middle Earth Enterprises on Rings of Power merch. It's just not been ironed out with Amazon yet.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah,
only been really one lead.
Embracer do have cooking. I think I've heard
Yeah.
like as a follow up to this Rivendell set, they have a Barad-dûr set I read.
Y-
I don't
That is
I don't
something
like, you know,
I think
I
it was
just read
leaked.
about it.
And then thank you, Callum, as always. Really appreciate the super chats. Always appreciate those. And then as what's it called? Yeah, as I think I saw it above as well here somewhere. I think someone said, yeah, pretty much nearly everything. Yeah, so yeah, I've just basically read out all things that could be possible in Rings of Power merchandise, but as of right now, um, that is something that is not being um explored. Not explored, but as in they have to get back onto that. Um,
Yeah.
Also, I know a company has there was a deal happened in December where a company signed on to do it. Diamond Toy Selects. If does anybody know them with building toys and stuff? Diamond Toy Selects. I know they are also on board because that was a separate deal that got ironed out in December. So maybe we'll get that in the future. Um, so now I think the final thing, well, is something where we think all this is going. Um, So Daniel gets it correctly. So if Embrace Amazon wants to make merch from Rings of Power, they have to contact each other. Yes, Amazon
Yes.
cannot make merchandise on the Rings of Power. Embracer can make Rings of Power merchandise, but it would be
They
basically
need Amazon.
using, they need Amazon because they need to use their visuals and everything, their content. Because they can make some knockoff Rings of Power stuff. Like they could do Rings of Power and make like do a Smeagol image and say Rings of Power, that's what they can technically do. And Amazon again do not own the name The Rings of Power.
Yeah. Middle Earth Enterprises not patented it, but placed it under copyright like shortly before the season aired. It was pretty funny.
Yep. And an interesting thing I have then received in the last few days is is so let me find it. So Embracer, their I've never know how to say it. Is it fiscal official fiscal year?
Fiscal year, yeah.
Yeah, their fiscal year ends on March 31st,
Does it?
2023. Yeah, for them specifically, for them, that's every company has different how they plan their years. So, oh, sorry, the first year ends. Yeah, their fiscal year ends 31st of March 2023. Apparently, from Lars, who is I think one of the chief officers, if not in charge of Embracer, they have said to investors there might be some big announcements and deals regarding in regards to Amazon, Tomb Raider, and Lord of the Rings, Microsoft publishing deals and platform deals for Game Pass, and then something for Savvy Games as well. So I would not be surprised if within the next month and a half, something big gets revealed around Middle Earth.
Yeah,
Um,
Lars guy is CEO. Yeah.
yeah, he's a CEO, and also when asked in a meeting, in literally a meeting last week, Lars said they have a good relationship with Amazon when an analyst asked. So here is we get into the speculation, and me and Hen are gonna differ on this, and I think so. Can I say I'll go through my viewpoint
Yeah, yeah.
first.
Do you?
So Embracer, funnily enough, even Amazon invited Embracer to set in October as well. There's
Hmm.
some people there as well.
Yeah,
They
that's very
have,
normal.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm saying, yeah, it's normal. They have a good relationship. Yep. And then I think, Steve, we're going to get on this now. First of all, again, thank you so much for Super Chat. Exactly where to leave us going forward. It's a minefield of rights, license, and headaches. So I think Warner Brothers, if you had to ask me, they will have to end up let go of the rights, because I don't think Embracer and Warner Brothers have the best relationship. Warner Brothers as well don't seem that crazily interested in the Lord of the Rings franchise as of right now, even with, for example, that War of the Rohirrim game. And even though it does have some good stuff happening in it, apparently some animators from Netflix anime shows, which aren't the best, are also working on this, which people behind the scenes are worrying about a little bit, but we'll have to see with that. But going forward, I would not be surprised if Embracer Group and Prime Video work out a deal for once these rights are retained. But so once the movie and the movie rights to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are the lease is taken away from Warner Brothers and now back to Embracer Group. That's the first step. The first deadline that they're working towards due to financial groups is April. That can take longer. Realistically, it's going to take probably till the end of the year. I would not be surprised if that is then sold to Prime Video, but that is not confirmed, and it can easily change, whatever. And then also in regards to the future around the other rights, I can see between now and the end of this year, Amazon continually getting more access to some of the how would I put it? Some of the special access they are gaining from right now. So let's move it back to this one. I think they will find a way. They will find a way or an agreement, a backhand agreement. I think where this can continue, but a much larger capacity. Because for example, there already are what's it called? They will what's it called? How would I say it? There already is a backhand agreement with the Rings of Power even being used. But and then Tim says 100% convinced all the companies will work closely. Yes, that will be a thing that I see going forward. That is working out with Prime Video with that, and also Warner Brothers. People ask what's the relationship between Warner Brothers and Embracer. As one out, there is none. There is no relationship. They have not reached out. Whether they did to under the Middle Earth Enterprise hierarchy, they could have, but since Embracer bought it, there's been no discussion. But also at the same time means Warner Brothers have not gotten back on whether they will give the rights away, and they might put up a legal fight. They might not, but I don't
Mhm.
think um, that will work out. Then we have things going forward with in regards to games as well. I think that will be an ever evolving concept. There's those one games left, but I do also think if Warner Brothers no longer have the rights, no, Warner Brothers don't have along the rights, but this is let's find it, is still in agreement. Um it say we can still get Warner Brother Middle Earth games and merchandise technically
Oh yeah.
without Warner Brothers having the rights. So that did
Yeah.
not stop that.
Yeah,
So
of
that can
course we
still
can.
be,
Yeah.
yeah.
They'll
So
just have to bear a Warner's logo somewhere, and they'll get a percent or something. But yeah, of course you can.
yeah, apparently we have a bot. So apparently we'll check that out. But in the meantime, and then actually no, I don't see anything. So that is where I think will happen, and there could be a scenario. This is long term where Amazon just ends up buying Embracer. That's already something that's potentially on the cards. Either that, or the fact that Middle Earth Enterprise is still so separate from Embracer. They're still keeping a separate entity. Amazon can just end up buying that once Embracer get the rights back from Warner Brothers. So that is the important thing. Everything. Um, So yeah, I think yeah, as Tim says, Warner Brother rights go back to Bracer and Bryce find a new film company. So and where do I think that would go? If the relationships look good right now, Amazon is one possibility. Henna's going to give the possibility of reusing it, then reselling it back to Warner Brothers, which I still think personally is really unlikely due to the incentive on, of course, Warner Brothers' side because. And then first of all, putting the franchise on the back burner, and then the money investment's not there at the minute. But then personally, I know who wants to know my opinion, but I think the rights should go. This is an outside opinion. I was explaining it to Hen earlier, and he was like, personally, if I wanted these rights to go, it would be interesting if Apple TV would ever be interested in doing this because I think Apple, they've just won Best Picture for a movie, I think Coda. They have access to good actors and they do it as well where you can still they do shows with big actors in them, but it's not the show is not good just or memorable just because of these big actors. They have it because they blend the shows and movies so well. And thirdly, people talking about Amazon spending $1 billion, this and that. Apple are still quite rich. And then also people talking about, oh yeah, how great, I think Prime the Rings of Power won a few VFX awards a few days ago, which is congratulations to them. But Apple, they work in technology. That's their primary. I know you could say Amazon do, but there's more retail. But Apple, they work in this, and I think we can get even greater stuff there as well. So that is it going to happen? Probably, most likely not. Will these rights get given to Amazon? That's where I'd put it. And then people saying back to let's find it. Steve Sadler super chat. Once this goes back to Amazon, no, once the rights go back to Bracer, which at least, then Amazon. I think they're there for Amazon for the taking, and then that just finishes all this. Who has what, who has this. Everything will most likely be under one house, one company, except from the Tolkien estate. And Hen, while you now go into yours, I forgot I
Yeah,
could put
yeah.
this one.
My thinking of it is really simple. The fact is that I think because this has been a very cerebral topic, I think it will be good to recap the basic of the rights situation, which is Tolkien estate owns the rights to any book that isn't The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. They lease the TV rights to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings to Amazon. Meanwhile, the film rights for The Lord of the Rings and a part of the film rights to The Hobbit belong to Middle-earth Enterprises. The other part belongs, as it happens, to Amazon, but it's a very insubstantial part. So we have, but there's another very significant right, which is the rights to the films themselves and their assets belongs to Warner Brothers. And those rights are actually very, very important because you can see that even Amazon, who set out to make their own adaptation, nevertheless are trying very hard to approximate that production design, to approximate that look, to approximate the visage of those actors, so it perpetuates that look of Middle Earth in media. And on the back of that, I'm assuming that Embracer certainly, who has spoken about wanting to make more films, and Warner's have actually done too. Zaslav has spoke about it. Um, will want, when they're saying more movies, they're thinking movies in that um, audio visual realization that is the wingnut film adaptations. And if they want to do that, they need Warner Brothers. Now, whether they need Warner Brothers as a third party contractor that just supplies the rights to those designs in favor of a small cut is one thing. But at the same, like, I don't know. It's a complicated topic, but I think a lot of this can be read as the usual kind of politics, kind of like, oh, we'll take the rights from you unless you give us more money. Like those sorts of maneuvers that people do, that
Hmm.
companies do, and the sort of maneuvers that Saul Zaentz himself did with these rights in years prior. He did absolutely the same thing quite a few times, actually. Um, so we'll just have to wait and see. I do think this is more of a subjective aspect, but I do think that on the whole, Warners have been a good home for these rights, arguably better than Amazon. You know, and it would be weird
Hmm.
for to suddenly have the Lord of the Rings, and I'm not sure too that the film rights are very valuable to Amazon specifically. I think Amazon I think sees this as something for their streaming service, so they're interested in long form series rather than in cinema.
Hmm.
Even though they can make movies certainly for MGM, but I think they view this more as a TV enterprise, as a streaming enterprise. And B, since they were reluctant to retread the ground that the movies have covered, even in the different medium of streaming, I think it would be very unlikely that they would now be willing to retread those grounds in actually in cinema. So that makes those, and I think that would be an explanation as to why they didn't get those rights to they didn't buy Middle Earth Enterprises to begin with. So it's, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I'm just saying. I guess what I'm really saying essentially is don't, you know,
Don't
uh,
write it off. Is basically
yeah,
the
don't write it off at this point. These
yeah.
things are complicated. These corporate things anyway are complicated anyway.
Hmm.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and now I think there's something happening in chat around stuff around Simon Tolkien and fans, whatever. Just it's best possible just to leave that be now for time being. I'll take over the discussion around Simon Tolkien. So interestingly, and I mentioned, so we interviewed the finalist showrunner who didn't make it at the end. He was in the same room with Simon Tolkien when he got interviewed for his pitch, and I
Brother, I think.
just
Yeah.
yeah, I think no, for a bit both of them were, and how it worked out was the pitch would go to Amazon, but Amazon would forward it on to Simon Talk. So Simon had the final say for everything for the pitch.
In
So if
in the
Amazon agreed with
pitches.
it, yep. If they agreed with it, but Simon didn't,
Yeah, you need both
then
parties to agree.
it wouldn't. And there were two meetings. The first one, I remember the same like thinking that this guy was just like some talker just being really quiet, really harsh, like not giving his cards away and just going, I think they're thinking, is this guy even interested? And is this guy like you would think he's really like involved with this so much? Then when the second interview came around, he knew everything like the back of his hand, and then put the pitch apart and then said what he liked or he disliked. Because the funny thing was, people don't know how JD Payne and Patrick McKay got the one. They were never in the running. It was two finalists, the people we spoke to, another person. All three pitches got rejected by Simon Tolkien. Then, because of that, they came to then JD Payne and Patrick McKay saw came involved. I'm not sure the technicality of how they came involved, but after all three got rejected and they're going back to square one, they came in and Simon accepted it. And
Yeah.
I think people, I know, it's interesting, they blame JD Payne, Patrick McKay for this, that, whatever. And some people might
Uh,
not might not like what stuff
yeah,
they've done.
I think like it's a very flawed approach
Yeah.
to I don't like something, therefore I need to treat it as a court case with people who are to blame and people who are just dragged along and less to blame and this guy
And
is really to blame. Like it's not like you didn't like it or you did like it.
yeah. And I
It's
think
just what it is.
yeah.
There's no need to play a blaming game on it. It's just
And I think
whatever.
no matter what showrunner was in this place, they would get blamed. I think because end of the day, people who were in the finalish. Okay, even if you took JD Payne and Patrick McKay out tomorrow, you put I don't know, let's say you put J.R. Tolkien himself, there or Christopher Tolkien there. Let's say for example, put them there. Amazon, despite let's say they got employed by Amazon, or maybe a son, a think of Tolkien, it would still end up having to meet the Amazon criteria. Amazon, in the interview, all their showrunners said they wanted hobbits, said
Yes,
they needed a big thing out of. So, like Hobbits and Half-Elves is not exclusive to JD Payne and Patrick McKay. I think
yes.
even if you put Peter Jackson there tomorrow, they'd still have the Hobbits and Half-Elves. The thing around, I know this thing having to have a big event, was it every episode? Having to
Yeah,
fight,
something like a big
yeah,
set piece of
a
some sort.
big set piece to end the episode, something like that. And then there are a few, there's a comment off the top of my head. There are a few other things, and I just think this show, what it was going to be, it was set in stone far back before even the showrunner was ever
Yeah,
involved.
some
And of
basic
course,
outline of it. Yes,
and
I
then
think so too.
I know with Patrick McKay, um, no, no, is it? I know Patrick McKay takes. I don't want to say how to say this in a not nice way, but from stuff that I've heard, like stuff like things you can't. I don't like. I let them leeway for having the pacing that's happened due to having to meet these events, having the half-its, but then at the same time you can have the mythal stuff and all that, whatever happened in season one, which I personally did not think was great. That you can. I think that was Patrick McKay's idea, and they it's an interesting, yeah, it's I think Steve gets it right. Interesting job. I think whoever would have picked it, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you can blame JD Payne, Patrick McKay for ruining Tolkien or whatever, and I think yeah, you can blame them for you can praise them for making the best Tolkien work ever. At the end of the day, it's a precedent that's been set basically by Amazon. I don't know how you don't like to say this, but it's basically a precedent set by Amazon executive that they need this checklist. I can even go back to your interview that didn't get released in the end and go through the other things that were required. Um,
Yeah, I do think, however, we like to present these situations as situations of collusion. I
yeah,
think it's much more likely that JD and Patrick got picked because they were simpatico. They saw eye to eye most with the executives who laid
yeah,
down these
hmm
edicts of you need hobbits, because if you look at the Harfoot scenes, they don't play like, oh well, Amazon forced us to have this in there. No, they they they, they put a lot of effort into them and they gave them a lot of time in the edit. They don't play like something that was enforced on them. They play like something that they and Amazon saw eye to eye about, which
yeah,
is something that you can
hmm
quote unquote blame them for. I just think that talking about this in terms of blame is the wrong way to
yeah.
talk about this. You can
I
disagree
think
with it very strongly and vehemently. I do, but to talk about it in terms of as if someone is put on trial is the wrong way to look at it.
yeah, I think, and even at the end of the day, I could, from what we heard, like if you play the blame game, it versus so many technicalities, and at the end of the day, I'd say, and this might be a hot take to some, but from what we heard throughout the production, I would say that I know Hen, you don't like to hear this a lot, and you might even again Hen even disagree with, but again the influence of Ron Ames. I think he was on the set every day. I think he was almost don't say like the Peter Jackson version of like he was on set because I feel like during the filming of season one, the JD Payne and Patrick McKay were also like in an executive role. They were kept away. They weren't. They did not.
Yeah, they
I
don't
don't
need
want
to
to say
be on
they
the
don't sit. Yeah,
sets.
but they
Yeah.
went on set a lot. And but the thing was, Ron Ames was there every single day making the calls if something didn't
Yeah,
work.
because he's
And then
what is
yeah,
he? Let me look.
and he was heavily influential. So if you want to like take blame for some stuff, then
Oh,
you
he's the
can put it.
producer, so okay, that makes
You
sense.
can put it there. Yeah, he was a producer, but he was also on set a lot. And
Yeah, yeah,
it,
because
yeah,
there are two types of producers. There are producers that are just desk jobs, and
yeah,
there are producers that are sort of what is sometimes called the line producer, the person who's
yeah,
who's on the ground, but he's on the set, yes, but he's dealing more with logistics. That's what producers do. Whereas the
hmm
idea with McPain as the showrunners is they're kind of like the arch screenwriters. They
yeah,
don't need to be on the set because that's not primarily what they do. They concern themselves with the major outline of the story, the realization of it in the writers' room with the writers, and then possibly and then the editing of it to get the piecing of
and
it together. But they don't need to be on the set. That in itself is not evidence to say that, oh, this production was hijacked or sort of ghost written, as it were, by someone like Ron Ames. He's
yeah.
just a producer.
But I think even despite being producer, he was still on set a lot and did do more
Yeah,
than
yeah.
just being a producer role. But and I think that when you get to go through even the further technicalities on that, then you got JD Payne and Patrick BK, then you got Ron Ames there. And then another thing where I'll get back to this soon, Tokyo Senpai. And it's interesting for the reason that even in the end, the most important the logistics of having JD Payne and Patrick McKay as you have them there that work and they were not even on set that much. Then you had Ron Ames who was there almost every day, and then I saw someone mention now the 8 episode where was it? Something about 8 episodes. Brian Cogman, during his period of writing, he pretty much set out the show in regards to what's going to happen when. So if you want, I don't want to see. This is where it gets to. Now you're going to blame Brian Cogman for this. Now you're going to blame, Ron Ames for that. Now you're going to blame JD Payne and Patrick McKay for that. Or now you're going to blame the executives who had to have Hobbits no matter what, had to have X, Y, and Z. But the thing with Brian Cogman, he was like, by episode 3, X has to happen. So this storyline hits off by episode 7, 8. So he set out the structure for the show in that regard, which is which again, then you put that into this writing room. It is um uh we'll get back to that conversation in a second. Took Senpai says, for the matter, doesn't Warner Brothers' rights persist while they can keep Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movie productions in development?
Yes, that's the idea. That's why
That is
Lord of
the
the Rings
idea,
is
and
a
that
thing.
is why,
As long as
once
there's a movie in production, yes.
which is why they want the agreement by one buzz by the end of 2023 because of what this movie coming up sometime early 2024. I think like by the
April.
time April, by the time end 2023 the agreement will be made that they will let go of the rights because the time is up, because technically
Presumably, yeah.
I think it was December 2020 like 31st when they technically like ended the least.
Yeah, but then they
Yeah,
went in the mediation and things as well. So,
I
but this
think
would have
yeah
been
I think
this would
the
have
best
been though shortly before the sale to Embracer.
yeah
So they weren't in mediation with Embracer. They were in
mm,
mediation with the Soulzance estate.
mm. And I think just to put this into context, let's pull up this one. Let's find it here. Yep. So say Warner Brothers agree to this tomorrow, they still technically have it until I guess until War the Rohirrim. So then after that, it's like they can't like Embrace can't do this and just sell it tomorrow. Then once that agreement, so once one of others hopefully amicably let go of it and they say, okay, we're no longer going to be involved, we're not going to like. So what Embrace don't want is that let's say tomorrow Embrace Warner Brothers is going to put oh, we're doing another new movie that's going to come out in 2027. And they don't want that to happen. They want it back. And then if that does happen, then they're going to sort legal action. That's why I was actually, when things were actually more tense earlier the end of
Supposedly,
last
yeah.
year, supposedly that was the way it's going to go. But then they, I think, embrace became a scenario. There is a team in place working until April to get the first, see how it goes forward. Then I think they're appointing an internal team as well. So
Yeah.
that is how that's working there. And I've accidentally hello everybody. How's everybody doing? Let's get back to this. So yeah, I think we were having
You were saying something about
yeah.
JD and
I
Patrick,
think
I
yeah,
think.
yeah, I think yeah. This is the thing about JD and Patrick. So yeah, I think it's an interesting job to have at the end of the day. I know personally, I know Patrick. More fan of the books. JD Payne, what you call. I think he's just a fan of television. Really, I think. Of course, you say that the Tolkien. I think the main problem I think around which got people so I think up and Adam a lot was around the fact. Um, let's see this. Wait, let's go. Let's see this first. Middle Earth understand entertainment understands that no one cares about Lord of the Rings without Warner Bros. I mean, people know Lord of the
Yes,
Rings
that's what I'm
as
thinking, basically.
they won't, but they won't make a reboot. Okay, that is an interesting thing. But what I would say at the same time is that realistically, um, Warner Brothers, honestly, from what they don't really 100% care about the franchise. I know I don't want to put it that way, but as of right now, it is not first and paramount for them. They've got legalish. They've got what's it called?
They've got debt issues. I
Finance
mean, Disney
debt.
have too.
Yeah, I know Zaslav said something about
Yeah,
something
they
about. I want to
won't.
make
They
movies. I
won't.
don't want to get
But
into
certainly,
technicalities.
yeah. But
Wait,
certainly,
Henry first. Wait.
your point is well taken. The priorities for Warner's across the board for the recent couple of years easily have been DC, which is horrible, and Harry Potter, which in its Fantastic Beast iterations is also horrible. But
Yeah,
you know what I but that
and
those are the two bigger. They make more money than the Middle Earth movies do.
yeah,
They
and
do,
I think
and they
another
cost
thing I
less.
didn't want to get into was for the people saying Zaslav said this, he said that I have proof of Warner Brothers lying to journalists saying that back in September that they still own the rights. They're like there is like is there I don't think there's that transparency there. They're just saying they said that publicly just to keep the rights. If realistically they wanted that, they would what's it called? They would find an agreement. They would have what's called put another movie in development instead of realistically an anime film War the Rohirrim, which is pretty much has a rounded error budget and is the animation. I think people behind the scenes are a bit iffy on, but it's still Tolkien work media. People might say the same. Rings of Power. No, um, no, not Tolkien either. Whatever. Like you can say it for anything.
Yeah, I'm personally not don't see any like I think the fact that it was done to again that
Yeah,
corporationally it was greenlit to extend the lease on the rights does not impugn any artistic merit
yeah,
that the production and the people involved are may put into it.
yeah.
And yeah,
And
the performance of it is the way it performs would be very important.
this is an interesting thing. But first, I'll tackle these two first. From a Turkish Empire. Now, if World of the we're hearing bombs, I could see NL. I'm so
Yeah,
Rob WB being more receptive to giving other rights. I think that
you
could be
like
a
Warner's.
possibility, but either way, I think this will have to happen before the reception for when Wuthering Him comes up. They have to have this deal done beforehand. Then I saw the next one. I have heard that Amazon are under contract to do 3 seasons, with season 4 and 5 being
No.
dependent on the show's successes. No? So it's an interesting thing around this deal around the Rings of Power because it is 5 seasons set in stone. I think no matter how you know bad it's doing, and I think season one for them, for Amazon, I think if you look at it, if you take your Tolkien fan out of it for a second and look at it objectively, it wasn't was it
Commercially, it's very successful.
commercially, was it the cultural success? Not particularly. You don't see anyone going down in the, of course, actually you've seen a few from the Galadriel Lama, but you don't really see that many around there, cosplay people at events, this and that, people talking about it. I think I and I
It
and
could certainly.
I
The
think I think
point is,
another
it.
way,
Yeah.
yeah. I think another way to look at it as well, culturally, like we've been doing Fellowship of Fans and we've been doing getting lots of scoops and exclusives. I know we just hit 50K, but like culturally, House of Dragon, I think still technically was bigger. I know one of their pages who does the work that we do have like over 150. I think there's just amount of engagement around it. But I know at the same time, everybody who worked on Rings of Power on the executive and commercial side got raised, got promotions. I know that for a fact. And to
Yeah.
them, season one was they got promotions. Everyone I know, even to the person who was handling the rights, got a promotion somehow. I don't know how you get a promotion for that, but they got a promotion. I think it's set in stone. I think it was 50 hours for 5 seasons. I think it's interesting because it's actually a one from the Tolkien estate in a way, because that's the deal. They want that much and only get one spin-off. Someone mentioned five. There's no five spin-offs planned as of like
No, it's
Amazon.
five
That's not part of the
seasons.
deal. Yes, 5 seasons, not five spin-offs. There's only one spin-off that they can do, and it is 5 seasons worth of
I mean,
like and
yeah. If
I
it
think
was a
another
colossal disaster, no one's gonna make you keep on pouring money into it. But it's not. The fact of the matter is that it isn't.
and I think again, sort of Cinder, it is interesting you say that, and of course, if Embracer will make close out, it will be death. We can't, um you
You
can't
know.
you can't objectively say that would be the case because despite whether you think Rings of Power was good or not, to an average person it was the line, it did the job. If you're not like us talking on a Sunday evening about it, if you're going around about it, you just you go in, there's a decent show, left, wait for season two. It's just about it. Is nothing done terribly. And then Tim Burton, I think spin-offs were mentioned very early on. Has it changed?
Yes.
It was only one spin-off, not spin-offs. There's not multiple. So there is still, I think that's the thing to make clear. Amazon still only have one spin-off up that they can use.
Contractually, at the moment, yes.
Uh,
Yes,
um,
but to speak to the point of if it's not in the cinema or not with Warner's, it's the end of. I like uh, I do think Warner's is a good home for this, and I do like continuing with and building on that audiovisual production design look
mm,
thing as Rohirrim is doing. At the same time, I'm not averse to different adaptations of it. Like, look
yeah.
at how many adaptations there are of Oliver Twist. Look at how many adaptations there are of Oz, of Shakespeare plays, of different ones.
I
And
think
the
it's
same
also
can be
like
with
important
as
to mention
well.
is, yeah, that a lot of that is open like rights now. I think, of course, that's the only like, difference, but still, yeah, your point still stands around the fact that, yeah, there are. I don't think,
That's artistically though.
yeah,
Commercially, I do think Embracer will want that look.
and I think with Lord of the
I really
Rings,
do.
um, the interesting thing was around the fact that maybe make New Lord of the Rings, at least the first movie, people are going to watch it because out of curiosity, I think. Whether the second or third one will be successful or not, who knows? But I think at least I don't think it would be a bomb. I think you'd say then you've got, since there are in 5 seasons, I can assume that the spin-off will be dependent on Rings of Power success. We don't have the numbers, but public reception has been relatively poor. Um, I think it's a thing where you start to categorize what reception and what group it is, because if you had to say the Tolkien fandom, I'd probably say middling. The reception is it like for me, was it the show that we 100% wanted? I don't think.
No,
No, I'm gonna put hands up and say it's not. Was it? terrible that I don't want to see another season. Some might feel like that, but put my
No.
hand up and again I'll say no because
I
I
do. I think ultimately what we do need to see, we need to see in both of these cases. We need to see how
yeah
Rohirrim performs, and we need
yeah
to see how season 2 of the Rings of Power looks and performs.
yeah
That
and
that will be the thing that will determine or help determine the trajectory
well
of
yeah but
films and of television,
but
artistically, commercially, everything.
but back to the point of whether it'll be dependent. We don't spin-off will be dependent on Rings of Power success. I still do think that is a fair point, but that could technically be. Remember, Henry, we were hearing a long time ago that we thought a spin-off announcement was going to be on October 17th or something.
Yeah,
I think I
I
mentioned that
think
one
I think I think
last
they
year.
were very enthusiastic early on. They were like really going, and then they just decided that it, not in a bad way, but just in terms of the amount of energy that they put into it, that they really have their hands full of this one show and they really want to focus on it, and
Mhm.
they'll develop a spin-off and work on a spin-off at some later point.
Yeah, and I think that the ultimate thing about Rings of Power, and I think if you want to say Amazon is what Amazon are upset about, realistically, I think people in past have said, we're one of the creators who went, influencer thing to went to the events, and then to, London event back then, and the premiere and stuff. But then realistically, at the end of the day, is caring like the reception of a niche Tolkien fans their number one problem they're worrying about, not really general reception, was decent. It wasn't terrible. I think critics weren't too crazy over it, but then but it
It has
still
a
did. Yeah,
decent Rotten
yeah,
Tomato score, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
but
but
it's
then I
not
think the
getting
thing is,
major awards.
from what I understand and what I've seen when I speak to people, I'm not going to say people at Amazon, but associated around all this, what they want and what this show, I think, categorically we can say hasn't delivered on is they wanted it to be cultural in a sense, and it's not cultural. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
go on Twitter, who's talking about Rings of Power on Twitter really? No, I'm not saying in a negative way. I'm saying it's like you got the I think something unhinged fellowship. I think stands and stuff for characters. I think that's one thing talking about it. I think the people who hate who don't like those people, and then they're talking about it. Then you've got Fellowship of Fans, us who are breaking news about Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. But out of that, it's just mainly just discourse. I think what Amazon really want and hope for season two is that when you go down the street, when you go to the next comic convention, you
Yes,
see
I
a
agree.
Galadriel there, you'll see an Elrond there. It'll be talked about, to like when you a year from now, when you go into work, you like I know heard some people say, oh, you're going to people are talking about Rings of Power, this is that. But um I remember when Game of Thrones came out, people talking about it. I remember even doing that 2 year between
Yes,
season
everywhere.
7, 8 or work the next day for the next month. People sitting in their breaks talking about it. No one's doing that with Rings of Power, but it can at the same time, season one, that could just be because during season one, they're setting the stage, stuff like that, and that could come in season two. But I think that is, if you want to see a place where Rings of Power needs to improve or something like that, I think that is where you aim at, not really at the Tolkien fan. And, of course, word of mouth is important, by the end of the day, it's right, even the Lord of the Rings community and think it's big, but it's not the biggest. I'd say Marvel's bigger, DC's bigger. I'd even argue Harry Potter is bigger than the Lord of the Rings community.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Of course it is.
yeah,
They're much more not better, not necessarily. I would say certainly not better artistically, but they're much more readily accessible. It's
yeah,
much easier to digest a Harry Potter film,
yeah,
and it's also more accessible to younger audiences
yeah. And
than a Lord of the
sorry,
Rings movie.
yeah. So this doesn't all mean Warner Brother losing the rights does not mean there's going to be a new Lord of the Rings, because remember, if you still talk about it, there's still so many other things that can happen. Like for example, let's find it. Let's
I
like stuff like
recently
this can happen. Angmar Water Release. A lot of stuff
Yeah,
can
yeah. I
happen. That's not
recently
Lord of the.
like looked again through the appendices in the mindset of okay, events. that can realistically be turned into movies. There aren't a ton of them, but there are quite a few. The Angmar Wars, like could make easily two movies at the very least, like one
Yeah.
early in the Angmar War, one towards the very end. There's the Kinstrife. There's there's Eorel and Kyrian. There is stuff there that you can do.
Yeah. And then Daniel says, can Embrace make Lord of the Rings movies right now, or does it need rights from one? So this is again, so like Warner Embracer do have the master rights. So they're always gonna have the rights no matter who they lease it to, unless it gets
Yes,
sold. So but then at the same time, the problem here right now, Warner Brothers have them on lease. So they need Embrace need to get those back from lease, and then they can do whatever they want. They can make whatever movies they want. But the thing is,
except
yeah,
they
but they
can't
embrace
use
the yeah,
they can't
yeah.
use Warner's production design.
They cannot use a production design unless you go technicalities around merch and stuff. But at the same time, Embrace are a game company. They got 400 million loss in their last quarter. They would lease it out again. So that is why this is why Warner think you want the right so much. And I don't want to talk about it in this regards because everyone watching are Tolkien fans, but to explicitly put it, from what I've heard, Embracer don't have the best quarterly results as of right now. They had some loss, quite major losses. Investors need this. They want Lord of the Rings back from Warner Brothers, so then it can be sold again. Well, maybe they could sell it back to Warner Brothers, but they need this because these investors need it, so the stock price will raise. I know Henry, you're talking about we accidentally raised Embrace's stock price, but like by saying the Tomb Raider stuff.
You did.
I apologize. Yeah, I apologize for that, but what happened was it's the arrangement around that Tomb Raider stuff. It was 600 million. It was a commitment to the franchise that made. So I was writing an article, 600 million commitment by Amazon that they would make a show, movie, and thing. Due to this commitment, embraced and trusted them. Now, if Paramount, Apple, even Warner Bros., if they want to make a commitment to the rights, if Tomb Raider at 600 million, then you're seeing maybe just over a billion, maybe I'd say 900 something million for Lord of the Rings for commitment to get it like that. And now you look at that, and now you think you're an investor. What do you want Warner Brothers to make? Maybe an anime film, which is whether it be good or not. Do you want them to make keep the rights for the next 2 years and make another anime movie, or maybe do a one-off movie on maybe Aragon or something that people are not going to really be interested in? Or do you get the rights? Do you get the rights back and sell them off, and then get 900 million commitment, and then embrace our producers on that, and then you get the back ends off that as an investor, and to get your company successful and in a stock market? That is what you need. And again, this might bore a shit ton of people. I'm sorry, but this is the other side of it, away from keeping it just what Tolkien fans want. And that's why I would be interested to see how that all works out with that. So I think that's interesting. If anybody has any more questions about it or are still confused, then please let us know. And me and Hen we'll stick around for a bit longer so we can answer questions. But Hen, do you have anything to say, or maybe what I said, or if you want to counter whatever?
I'm looking at stuff like the comments and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I do think Warner's can make very interesting and very commercially appealing films with another lease on the rights. We'll just have to wait and see what goes. But I do think, Embracer would be totally into it to have with Warner's like an Angmar War movie, or something like that would be awesome, and would be very appealing commercially.
Yeah.
I think the fact that the War of the
No, that is
Rohirrim
true.
is animated does not necessarily mean that Warners have only interest in producing animated versions
Yeah.
of these films. It's just
And
that's the way the stars align for this project.
yeah,
And I
to use
also don't, it's we don't know how
and
things went
yeah,
down.
and to use my logic again, and to defend Warner's in a way, this Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit bring what 3 billion, 4 billion in
Six,
revenue. Yeah, six. Yeah, six.
like
And if this
5.89
yeah,
something.
if this is a tested and proven franchise, if they go back to Warner Brothers more, they might get more, you know, stuff off it. But then the problem is, and the reason why this is happening, they don't have the money for it. They don't have the investment and time for it. Warner Brothers have a great relationship with Amazon, and that is where the money's at. I think, you know, it's
We'll see.
that's how you do it.
Warner's certainly like, I mean, let's keep things in proportion. Warner's is in debt and is, doing all sorts of things to, like, they're cutting mostly in streaming and things that go direct to streaming,
Mhm.
but they can certainly mount a big movie if they want to, very easily. I mean, it's still a very big movie company, and it can still mount very big productions if they so wish. I mean, they're in the process of making Dune Part 2 at the moment, which is a
Yeah,
very big movie.
and
Um,
yeah, that is. Do you know? Yeah, it's a good franchise for them. Dennis, if Warner Brothers lose the rights to Lord of the Rings, I don't think Embrace will sell them again because Warner Brothers has also been doing very poorly in recent years. But I don't really get the
Again,
correlation
what I
of
was just
yeah,
saying, yeah.
yeah. It's the thing is, then they're just holding on to these franchise. They're just holding
Which
on
is,
to it. Like
which to
they're gonna
be
have to do.
fair is something that Saul Zaentz himself did
Mhm.
for after the Bakshi film, even though the movie was a modest financial success.
Yeah.
Saul Zaentz just held on to the rights for like 20 years, wouldn't like flirted with having it adapted, but didn't commit to anything until
Here's
Miramax got him to.
here's a funny thing. Let's say, what do we think, Ken? 2 years today, if we had to do 19th of February 2025, where do I think stuff's going to be? If I had to make a prediction, it would be Amazon would have bought Middle Earth Enterprises, or that including Embracer itself. I think Embracer is something that will probably something big happen between then, and I think that is something that will happen.
Yeah, I just don't see what how these particular rights forward anything, help Amazon in any way, because they're clearly focusing on this franchise as a streaming franchise. They're
Yeah.
clearly not wanting to retread grounds that have been covered by the live action films. And so, what use do they have for film rights for two books, the bulk of which has already been covered in films?
But
So I
then at the
really,
same time, you
the
say
thing
that,
that they think they do have use for is if they could get hold of Warner's production design, but that's not something that Embracer has the power to offer them.
but
So
then, okay, let me say it like this. Okay, you might be a diehard, not saying you, but someone might be a diehard Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings fan, movie Hobbit. If you want to inject some excitement, positivity back into it, imagine you get, you sell these rights. No, Disney hit some. I'm not say Disney, but example, Disney Paramount tomorrow make a new Hobbit film. That would get much less backlash. And let's say in the whole that though that Hobbit film or films were good, then that conversation, which originally had no merit to it at all, starts being green. Because I think we can both agree that the Hobbit, despite it still doing financially well, people, I don't think we'll be the end of the world in seeing another adaptation down the line. I'm not saying 2 years, 5 years, maybe even longer, but that is a route that you could have. Instead of doing it, Lord of the Rings with Hobbit, some might do Hobbit, and then maybe if it does well, then you could get Lord of the Rings, and then
yeah, but I do think that in spite of those misgivings critically, the fact that it's so closely tied with the Lord of the Rings in terms of image, it's like, this would be a good example when Disney bought Star Wars.
mm,
The prequel trilogy was, and in parts of it very rightly, reviled, but they didn't go, okay, we're deleting them out of canon and we're doing them over again. No, because they're so, even though it's disliked, it's still accepted.
yeah.
That's
But
basically
then,
the situation that
then
we
to
have here.
counter that, say Amazon, say Rings of Power becomes a success, season 2 to season 5, then that's a new image of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. Then that puts
Yeah,
it
but
into
it's
the
also an
media
image
and
that's approximating the look of you see what I mean?
then
I would make less of the need that Embracer have to retain the look of the Lord of the Rings if Amazon haven't been doing their darndest to approximate that look themselves. in a different adaptation in a different medium, and they still tried it.
And then
And I
another
think
thing.
that perpetuates the look of Middle Earth as a Peter
Mm,
Jackson kind of Middle Earth more than
yeah,
anything else. The fact that a different company tried to do a kind of Peter Jackson in drag, as it were.
yeah. Then if you look at it from this perspective, Amazon, billion-dollar company, they're not, the most righteous, capitalism, whatever, all that. You buy Lord of the Rings, it's off your competitors if they're going to make rival stuff. That's also another thing that you have to look at as a possibility, and that's take. But then I think I saw another thing earlier on. So Daniel, we'll go over this again. So what do you think will happen eventually to the movie rights, assuming Warner Brothers uses them? My realistic thing is Amazon and then Embrace have a really good relationship. I think they will maybe probably buy it out. Whether I want that or not, as someone as someone who's gone to, whatever events, shills, whatever for Amazon, would I want Amazon having that? I personally want Apple to have it. I think that would be an interesting way, a new way. They're it seems like they're doing quality over quantity, and it seems like some place is a good place that I think. Yeah, and Atoka Senpai says, yeah, selling the Lord of the Rings the Hobbit does not mean you lose mood. There's appendices, there's rich material there,
Yeah,
definitely. I think,
I was mentioning there's like
yeah.
material for there's quite a few events in the appendices that lend themselves to be films.
And
One
again,
of
we
them is
forget,
obviously the War of the Rohirrim itself. Another is the Rings of Power itself. That's
yeah.
also from the appendices. But
And then I
there's a
know
couple more.
people hate, original characters, that original stories, things of power, but then we still have these rights which are floating around somewhere.
Yeah.
Like someone, like let's say God forbid, but Disney could pick them up tomorrow and make a brand new Aragon film, creating X, Y, Z.
Yeah,
That's basically what Return to Moria is. Like if we take it aside, Return to Moria is effectively just
yeah,
you
kind
know
of. It's
yeah,
it's
just that.
we've had Ian Nathan here a couple of times. And
Oh yeah,
his book,
good friend
which, by the way,
of the channel.
every fan of the making of the Lord of the Rings should have that book. He does say, he kind of says it half in jest, but he's saying it remains perfectly permissible, he says, for Warner Brothers, this was in 2017, the book is, to make a sequel about the adventures of, after the Return of the King. I don't think they would, but they certainly can. Like, they can extrapolate from the material and add, their own, you know, like,
And again with this,
yes, I think
most
that's
people
right. I
did not
think
like
that's
Rings
right.
of Power. Most people, I could argue, most people did not like The Hobbit, but that still happened. And then iconic Lord of the Rings, not iconic The Hobbit. I think that is a loophole where you can go down the line and you just make the same argument again and again. And if someone, I think, if there's a fresh new potential thing with The Hobbit, you never know what can expand from there. But then selling the Lord of the Rings of The Hobbit again is not just those stories. There's so many other stories in there which they can, these other
It's a
thing
couple.
companies, yeah, they can. You can make, and you could even go as far as timeline and
Yeah, but
finding a
why?
name on the
But
timeline.
my question would be, why would Amazon want to make that as movies?
I'm
They
not
seem to
talking
be
about
interested in
Amazon
making
directly here.
shows. Yeah, just saying.
I'm not.
If we're saying that the most plausible thing is Amazon, we need to ascertain an interest that Amazon will have in these rights, and I don't think they do. If they did, they would have bought them when they were first put on the market. The fact that they didn't is because I think they see this primarily as something for their streaming services, not as movies.
I think, but then I'm saying beyond a different company would want that. Imagine that fresh take if it goes beyond. But of course, you could probably tell we differ on this, but it could be an interesting thing.
It could be
And then
very
again,
interesting, but commercially, we'll see.
and then I think, then again, shit, I don't know if I got my passport out on screen. I didn't mean that. Um, again, talking about Rings of Power season one, whether it was good or not. I think someone's mentioned chat 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. Um, I think the interesting thing here is at the end of the day, I don't want to say it's naive, but whatever side of the spectrum you're on, I think what the fan community wants is a nice thing to have, but realistically, it's not the primary thing for them. I don't think. I think seeing the 38% of motivation, seeing fans not like it, seeing hate videos on it, seeing even seeing praise videos on it. I think if you're marketed for the show, I think you look at this subsection maybe a little bit, and the rest is goes to this general population. And I think if you had to put Rings of Power season one, if I had to put no bias to it as a Tolkien fan, was Lord of the Rings or anything like that, if you had to look at it from season one objectively, like I think even whatever you think politically as well, Hen, I'm not sure your political stance, but I'm still quite young. I'm still under the age of 20. I honestly don't give two rats ass about politics. To be honest, I don't even know. I didn't even know which conservatives Labour were until a few years ago. So like stuff like that does not really bother me. If I had to look at it, Rings of Power was a show at the end of the day that maybe it was just on the line for average audiences. It didn't move the needle, but it didn't break the needle. Is how I would put it. I think is that fair to say? It didn't move the needle. It didn't break the needle. It's there, and it's got 4 seasons to either mend that or break that. And I think doing it like that at the end of the day is I think the way to look at it and say you can bring up 38% Rotten Tomatoes and this and that, but realistically and I'm not saying it just for that. Like you can bring up, oh yeah, the show got this man applause, this many. It was the same with the awards. It's critical. You can say the show got this award, it got 30% on Tomatoes. It won 3 VFX awards. This and that. Yeah, it's just all nice, good, positive things for the show. But at the end of the day, it's basically prime subscribers. It's wanting the show to do well. No, is getting the minutes watched and getting it like that. I think that is where realistically, is where it all happens. And I think I think it's not the nice stance you want to look at it, but it is a stance and the stance. And I think Soul of Cinder raises an interesting question. What is the most popular and best selling Lord of the Rings game? Um what would you say? I think Lord of the Rings Online would probably that, or was War of the North
I
ever
haven't
big?
played, so I don't anything
Yeah.
really. I wouldn't know.
Who owns? Tim mentions who owns Lego now Hasbro. I'm not sure, but I do know for a fact that Lego and Embracer spoke in December, and Lego is down to do merchandise and Lego sets for the Rings of Power, but Amazon have not signed off. Amazon have not spoken to it in any ways.
Yeah, Lego is its own thing.
Yep, and I think uh uh what's called so I think that is. So I'm just sort of. I'm gonna quickly go through. Hen, do you want to take over for a minute while I see if I've not missed anything quickly?
Go over what?
Does anything like say something?
Like it's basically what I said. I think it's worthwhile to outline the right situation again, the basics of it, which is Middle Earth Enterprises has the film rights, Amazon have on lease the TV rights, Warner's have the rights to pre-existing adaptations that they've made, and actually adaptations that they did made like Bakshi film as well is due to
See,
historic reasons belongs to
we
Warner.
got this. Sorry, interrupting you. This
So
I'm not
that's
sure.
very important.
Yeah, Huntsman's Meads, but Middle Earth Enterprises had a private mediation clause for disputes with New Line Cinema, but Embracer doesn't. If they don't fork up money or exit the franchise, Embracer will sue. Um, if that ever did happen. Warner says they still have film rights. The opposite is true. If the film rights lapsed, we would know it. Oh, sorry, that's the person who's in the know. Um, the, it is well they wanted to keep the right. It made point. There's no running. I know. Small they. I guess. Movie series made by shape by the they can't make their own American movie with the. Oh yeah, so we'll go over the final bits then with the bracer. So immediate future. I think the immediate future of what we should expect from what I've heard in the last 24 hours Rings of Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Embracer. They have on the 30 by the 31st of March. That's the end of their fiscal year. Um, at the end, they have their fiscal year. A big announcement potentially might come out from Embracer. Um, a deal potentially of some sorts, a licensing deal of the TV/film rights of Tomb Raider, and they're working with Amazon for Lord of the Rings licensing, and and then that is quite interesting. Also, if anybody is interested in other movies and stuff like that, um, Amazon are actually starting a brand new original um original thing. Where is it? Let me find it. They
Amazon
are.
certainly can make movies. They own
I'm saying this
MGM.
is nothing
That's a
got.
movie studio.
Yeah. This is
Yeah.
nothing got to do with Tolkien, by the way. I'm gonna wait. Uh, okay. This is. Let me find it 1 second. Okay, here we go. Middle Earth Enterprises has been approached by around 237 companies, game companies, to do merchant games with. No, not making like sorry, not game, to do merchandise for. So that's 232 companies, and there so one 233 companies, sorry, want exclusive or shared use of 183 licenses that is tied in with Rings of Power as well. So that is a number. Quite big number, 2133. So that is where that is with that. And if anybody wants news on the Tomb Raider stuff, it's a brand new timeline and continuity that picks and mixes the best story elements from all previous games and movies, and then jumps forward so it's not another origin story. So um, that is that with that. So I think Hen, we have pretty much covered. Oh, here we go. So this is exclusive. Ooh. There's something being banded around Amazon. They have a major franchise launching called Citadel. It's 4 or 5 interwoven action spy series and potentially a video game developed by one of the Embracer studios. And apparently Priyanka Chopra and Richard Madden are the leads for the UK one. So you know, action spy thriller
It'd
movies
be
coming from it. You heard it here first. Okay. Well, I've seen us. Amazon can make movies. They have a deal with MGM, but Warner Brothers has a deal with MGM. They can it. I don't think they can. It's distribution, isn't it, Hen?
it's two things. MGM has the rights historically since the Bakshi film to distribute a film adaptation based on The Hobbit. That's very insignificant because again, the fact that Warners have made a film with MGM, and I really don't think, regardless of how we think about that film, that anyone is going to retread that territory anytime soon. In much the same way that I don't see Warners, for that matter, doing a film that covers things that the Rings of Power has covered. It's just, you know, you tend not to do that commercially. Now, if they get the rights themselves, they can produce movies, Amazon can by themselves through MGM, but they don't have the rights to the movie's production design. And I think that's more significant in this show is exhausting the second age material. They're doing the entire second age in one show. That leaves room for movie spin offs, which are set in the third age. And the closer you set things to the Lord of the Rings proper, the more people will expect, Amon Sul to look like itself and Rivendell to look like itself, quote unquote. Like the closer you are in timeline to the Lord of the Rings, the more people expect it to look like the Lord of the Rings, and the less you can get away with the kind of ersatz um, Peter Jackson look-alike thing that the Rings of Power is doing with the second age.
That is fair. That is fair. So yep. Sorry. So that is quite a lot of stuff. So I think Hen will be around for a few more minutes, I think. So if you want to send in any questions or still queries or stuff that you don't understand or hypotheticals that you want us to discuss, then we can go through it.
No, I think we covered. Like we've
You
talked
know
a
what I'm
lot
saying?
of,
Yeah.
with the chat and stuff as well, so that counts for a lot of our talking our heads off now. But we'll just have to wait and see. I think we would be very much more clever and know much more.
Mm-hmm.
A when we get more about, we just need to wait and see.
Yeah. And
I think
it's in.
when we get more info about Rohirrim, we might along the way also have information, official information that will elucidate the right situation for us a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think back to Rings of Power, maybe we'll end up on this. It's interesting to see. Oh, I think let's all realize. Look, we've got a little graphic. I think thanks Kyle for this, for doing that. Very nice. Do that stuff. Um. I think with Rings of Power going forward, I think the season two. Um. Season two is will be, I think, it'll be. I think we were talking about this before, and it's almost like it's kind of make or break in regards to what way they'll go forward with it. You know.
Yes, I think season two is very important. Not in the way that I remember early on feeling very strongly against people who were like, well, we need to see the whole thing to make our opinion about it. And that's just obviously a canard. But I do think season two, having said that, I do think season two is very important because after season one, you can theoretically nudge things, change things, adapt to audience reception and stuff. But once you're two seasons in and the show is taking on a certain style, a certain tone, a certain trajectory, then you're two out of five, you're kind of married to it. You have to sleep in the bed that you made for yourself. So the way season two ends up will determine a lot of the stuff going forward. And it's doubly important because season two, like season one, is going to cost a lot of money because of the move to the UK. And it's a big move. It's moving all the sets and stuff to the UK. Season two is going to look a little bit different from season one, both because of recasting the Adar role and because of the change of the location. It won't look necessarily radically different because obviously the establishing shots of the locations will be the same, but nevertheless, it's still a different country. It's gonna look different. And so it's really, really, really. In the second season, the identity of the show, any show, is still to some extent in flux. After the second season, it's kind of set in stone to a large extent. And so we'll have to see how season two pans out. And also, the other thing that is very important about season two is how far it pushes the narrative forward along the outline of the second age. That is to say, we believe from things that McPain have said that season two will get us quite far along into the war of the elves and Sauron, possibly as far as Sauron's capture by Numenor even. And so, if that's the case, that is very significant to the shape of the show as a whole, because that is basically saying that they're trying to get all this elf stuff out of the way so they can focus on Numenor more, which is, important in terms of how they see this going. So season two is really, really crucial. We need to
Yeah.
see two projects to see how they handle themselves, both commercially but also artistically. And those are Rohirrim as something that will set the path for any future endeavors on the big screen, and season two of the Rings of Power in terms of the small screen. And that's also true commercially. We need to
Yeah.
see how leggy, quote unquote, season two is commercially. We need to see
Mm-hmm.
if any misgivings that people have combined with the time between seasons will hurt it in any way or
Yeah.
not. We'll
And
have
I
to wait.
think yeah, yeah. Well, no, I think that's fair. And I think now looking at I think we've got a few questions around the games. So around the fourth game, we are looking into. We actually got sources in New Zealand right now trying to figure that out. So we'll hopefully got updates on that soon. And as regards to the
The weather
fifth
game?
game, the fourth, yeah, the Weta game, yep. And then
Yeah.
for the fifth one, I am pretty sure it's going to be from I haven't got it confirmed, so I don't want to what's it called? I don't want to confirm it, but I'm pretty sure it will probably be mobile as well. Uh, what's it called? And that's I think that is where we go. Um, uh, so I think that is a final thing, and I and it's interesting. Chad says I disagree with Fellowship of Fans on the subject of Rings of Power. It is interesting like that because Fellowship of Fans is not just me. It's like
Yeah, we disagree all the
17,
time.
17, 18 of us. And like for example, like it's not one unified opinion. It's like and like what do you
Not at
think of the
all.
show?
Not even
Honestly,
remotely so.
yeah. What do you think of the show? Honestly, like really, like you did think it was the best. I think.
Me?
Yeah, you.
I
Yeah.
I have very I want to rewatch it. I think it's important to rewatch it a long while after it's out. Like not even now, like a few
Mm,
weeks from now, possibly even more. I
yeah.
do find myself thinking back kindly or warmly about some of the production design, even though it is kind of new line adjacent. It's
Mm,
still very pleasant. Some of it. I think Numenor looks great. I think Region looks very nice. Khazad-dûm looks very nice. Um, there's a lot of stuff like that, and there's not to not to just damn it with faint praise of saying, oh, it looks pretty. I also think they have some dramatic choices that work very well. Um, at the same time, I think it's really, really plagued by extremely low pacing, like very slow, and just a very, very, very different view of what Tolkien is and the basic approach to Tolkien and to fantasy as a genre than
mhm.
what I think it should be, and we all watch these things for ourselves. So that's just, the way we are.
Yep. And then I think Tim's got a message for you in chat as well.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
that's not me, that map. It's very nice, that illustrative map. I did write it down in text quite a few times
mhm,
in on Reddit and other places just to sort of outline the situation to people, but I've never like made a graph out of it. My graphic skills aren't that evolved, unfortunately.
yeah. And one final thing while everyone's here, I was wondering, do you ever want us to talk about different shows and content media, other stuff, which Star Wars, Wheel of Time, stuff like that? Are there any Wheel of Time fans in the chat right now? I was wondering, just curious to see. If so, then um, we have some information about that. I know that the first three episodes of season two is actually meant to be quite really good, in fact. But the person who replaced, I think, a character called Matt, is not better than season one Matt, but he's a safe option. So you're not going to be getting something too different. It's just like a safe, grounded option with back. It's nothing extraordinary. It's nothing crazy. It's just something that he it does the job type thing. But yeah, apparently the first three episodes of season two are pretty good. So I think that is a nice thing to hear. And now, finally, before we wrap up and go, next Sunday, Hen, me, you, Farking, if he is feeling better. Maybe some get wells in chat to Barkin as well, because he's not feeling the best right now. And I believe, well, he's sick. I mean, not mentally. What's it called? And then should be Strider as well. We've got,
Yeah,
yeah, he probably mentally messed up as well. Who knows? He loves dwarves too much.
I love dwarves
We've got,
too.
yep. The we've got our biggest season two scoop so far. Hen, you know already. You think I think it's time to
Yeah,
go
for this
through.
season. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Not like
our
that's
biggest season 2 scoop so far next Sunday, and I think first time I think well, I actually get people quite excited. So we've got
yeah.
yeah, we don't want to give too much away, but yeah. So next Sunday, make sure to be here again, same time, and we'll go through we'll reveal some quite big scoops for the Rings of Power season 2. And Victoria asks one last time, do you perhaps know something about the season 2 release?
Yeah, that's the other thing about season two. When is it coming out?
Yeah.
It will be
I
a
think
while.
filming is until August, end of August, middle of August, sometime
Yeah,
around
post
August.
productions on these
Like,
things takes
yeah.
a while.
I asked someone who's in the industry, not Lord of the Rings related, but in the industry, and they gave me a prediction of about fall 2024. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
is fall autumn. I think it's American.
Yes, fall is autumn, Harry. Yes. Why am I? uh, You're the Englishman. Never
No,
mind.
it's American. Fall is an American concept. Not I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, yeah. But that's interesting because fall, end of the year, puts it after the release of Rohirrim, and I don't think the
Mhm.
projects should be sort of presented as competitors at all. Actually, I think they are, and
Mhm.
I think that's very unfortunate. But it's just interesting that we get two different takes on two different time periods of Middle Earth and two different stories,
Yeah.
relatively close to each other, and
Mhm.
with the one coming up before the other. So it will be like a 1-2 punch.
Indeed, indeed. So yep, I think this is just about us. I want to thank everyone in chat today for. I think there's been a lot of conversation, and I think there's of course people on different sides, but thanks for mostly keeping it respectful. And I think there might be
Yeah,
one or
yeah, it was
two
fun.
bats, but I think
Everybody.
overall I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, King Finn, or thank you, Tim, for joining and
Yeah,
sacrificing
thank you, Tim.
your. Yes, I know. It's Peter. I'm hungry as hell right now as well, so I need to. Guess
I'm
what,
always
Hen? I'm
hungry.
having. Guess what I'm having tonight?
What?
Fajitas, Mexican heritage. Boom. That's oh my god.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. We don't get a lot of Mexican food. Like we do, I just don't.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see.
So,
Oh,
thank.
probably. I'll
Thank
see
you.
what I'll make.
Yep. Thank you, Ixelion, as well, and thank you to everyone. And I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, it was fun discussion, guys. Thank you.
and see you next Sunday with the big scoop of season 2 so far. So don't forget
Yes.
that. Thank you.